Hi everyone, this video is brought to you by Project Usaari, a social initiative that aims to increase the access of public speaking amongst the students of Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities across India. This video is the third video in the series called Basics of Public Speaking, the 10-minute series. Today we're going to discuss why people fear public speaking and how you can overcome it. In today's video, we're going to discuss three things. Firstly, what are the causes of this fear? Secondly, how does this fear look like? And third, how can you manage this fear? Firstly, let's look at some of the major causes of fear. Now, the list that you see here is a list that I have collated because these are the fears that I've seen. These are some recurring fears that I've seen in a lot of beginners who are starting out public speaking. Hence, we'll tackle them one by one. Firstly, the fear of judgment. When we speak in front of others, we feel like we're being constantly evaluated, right? How we look, what we say, whether we sound smart enough or not. And this kind of pressure just pressure to be perfect just increases our nervousness, right? But here's the truth: most people are not judging you as harshly as you think because they're either focused on themselves or just listening casually. Believe me, this is the biggest reality of anybody who's listening to you, and you really need to keep this in mind, but still try to give your best in everything, right? The fear only comes from overestimating how much attention and how much others are analyzing you. It's really just in your brain, right? Because public speaking becomes really easier when you shift your mindset from being, oh, am I being judged so harshly, to what value am I giving to the room? What value am I adding to the room by sharing my thoughts? Because the biggest aim of public speaking, you all have to understand, is using how you're actually using the medium of public speaking to share something that you really care about. And I think that is the biggest thing that you should keep in mind when you're doing public speaking, because it is one of the few activities or sports that actually give you a really brilliant platform to share your thoughts with the world, and everybody deserves to listen what you have to say, right? Secondly, lack of familiarity. Now, we need to understand that fear also often comes from the unknown. I mean, if you're not used to speaking in front of people, your brain treats it as a very risky task, right? So think about it. Your first time doing anything feels uncomfortable. Say when you were starting to learn a bicycle, it must have been very uncomfortable, right? You must have fallen so many times, you must have hit yourself so many times. You obviously, anything, whenever you start something new, right? And I think the first two to three or maybe five attempts of anything that you do are extremely difficult. However, it is these five attempts that will actually build your mental strength to continue whatever you want to do. And it's really important that as students, you override that continuation phase, right? Because it's really important that you all don't give up and just keep on doing whatever you're doing in terms of public speaking. Thirdly, no clear structure. And I think this is a fear that is not talked about enough, right? A lot of students who come up to me and say that, hey, we're very scared to speak on stage, we really don't know, what if we forget a line, what if we forget a certain part of a speech, I'm not able to learn this particular part of my speech, and I think I'm going to forget it, and then I'll make a fool of myself. You really need to understand that as I told, nobody is really listening you that closely, nobody is evaluating you as harshly as you think they are. And secondly, you really do not need to worry about memorization so much, because if your speech is genuinely coming from your heart, if your speech is something that you genuinely want to share with everybody, you will never ever fear whatever you're trying to deliver, right? Because this might sound very abstract right now, but just understand, when you have a structure, you're not guessing your way through the speech, right? You're guiding your audience step by step, and that is the sense of direction that reduces fear significantly. And how do you structure your speech? Now, this is something that we're going to discuss at like a large length in during the course of this entire series and also in the next video that we're going to post. But just understand that if you have a good structured speech, you will never ever ever fear anything. Take the example of your teachers, or take the example of your principal or your headmaster, who might be delivering a speech when during a school assembly, or your teachers when they're teaching you in the class, right? All of your teachers, all of your principals, they have a clear structure, like a roadmap, right? Because if they do not know the beginning, the middle, the end of their speech, they will never be able to be as articulate, as efficient, and as effective of a speaker as they are when they're delivering a speech. So you really need to understand that structure is really important, and believe me, nobody talks about how important structure is, but that is why Project Usaari is here to fill that gap. Now, how does this fear look like? Now, this is not really a very, very important slide. However, I'm just going to walk you through whatever are the main points that this slide talks about. It's just that whenever you're scared to speak and you just simply avoid speaking, you are really just avoiding the problem, right? Because once you start avoiding a particular problem a lot, you're always going to be unprepared, and with unpreparedness comes a lot of fear. And when you are constricted by fear, there's going to be no improvement in your skills at all. And if there's going to be no improvement, that fear, that lack of unfamiliarity, as I discussed in the last slide, is always going to prevail, because you just never tried. You just never tried in general, right? You've stopped trying. So as students, I really don't think that we should give up so fast, that we should just give up in a jiffy, just because we were not able to get selected in a certain audition that our teachers took, just because we were not able to win a certain prize um, in a particular tournament that we participated in. I mean, had you won the prize in the first go, it would definitely have been an amazing feeling, but you would never have gone through what it actually takes to reach like good level of winning, right? So I think it's really important as students that you should never stop trying. Always like make a mechanism by which you can actually incorporate public speaking daily in your life, and believe me, it is going to help you improve manifold. Now, how can you manage this fear? And I think it is really important that you also learn how to manage all of these fears differently. Believe me, like just understand, it's like a disclaimer as well. All of these fears are subjective, and even the management tips are going to be subjective. That is to say, not every child is same, and not every public speaker is same, not everybody's system is same. So these are just tips. You can always improvise them according to your own needs. Firstly, the first tip is practice out loud and not in your head. And I think this is something that a lot of parents and a lot of teachers advise young students who are just starting out public speaking, and I think it's a really good habit, but not a lot of students do it. Because whenever a certain student comes up to me and says that, hey, I have a declamation coming up in 2 days or 3 days, and they're like, oh, I still have to learn my speech, I've learned my speech, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to speak it as good as I'll be able to speak it as effectively as possible. And I always wonder, why are they so focused on learning their speech and not refining it, right? Because the thing is, learning your speeches is definitely important, but as we progress in this course further, you'll start to notice how I'll be changing this statement. Because learning your speech is not as important as you think, and this might sound very weird right now, but believe me, as we move forward in this series, you will know that why learning your speech is not important. But as beginners, learning your speech gives you the confidence that yes, you can deliver a really spectacular speech on the stage. However, instead of just focusing on memorizing your speech as if it's like an answer that you have to learn for your academic subjects, just consider it as something that you're doing. It's See, you need to understand, public speaking is an art. It's not a rote memorization competition, right? So what I used to do when I was starting out public speaking was, I definitely learned my speech, but whenever I was learning my speech, I also incorporated a lot of expressions and a lot of voice modulation when I was memorizing my speech, because it not only helped me memorize but also had a lot of expressions, because of which I was able to memorize both the expression and the voice modulation that I had to use for a particular part of the speech, as well as learn the entire speech by heart. Secondly, start small, not big. And I think this is really important. This means that whenever you're trying to practice for a tournament, always first try to speak in front of a smaller audience, maybe a group of friends, maybe your classmates, maybe a group of teachers, or maybe your entire family, right? Because it gives you because it just creates a sort of illusion in your mind that yes, I'll be able to speak in front of a bigger audience. And I think this is something that is really underrated, because a lot of students, they just deliver and practice their speeches in front of maybe a single teacher, a single parent, or a single sibling, which is fine. However, as beginners, I think um, you should really try to practice your speech in front of a slightly bigger crowd than just being one person, right? Because what I used to do as a public speaker when I was starting out was, whenever I had an intra-school competition, I always used to tell my class teacher in the morning that, hey, can I please practice my speech in front of the entire class, so that I gain some amount of confidence and I really do not like get jittery on the stage. And believe me, if you go up to your teachers and request them if they can do so, they are never ever going to reprimand you or refuse to help, because teachers are extremely supportive to students who are actually trying to improve themselves in a particular skill based activity. So believe me, you can always count on your teachers. They're always going to be extremely supportive. Thirdly, reduce uncertainty, use structure. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time discussing structure here, because there's a video coming up that is going to discuss structure at length. But just believe me that structure is extremely important, and please just memorize this word, print it wherever you want it to, because it is extremely important. It is what separates like good public speakers from the average ones. Now, this brings to the end of this session, but before I end the session, I request you all to check the description box below for a free assignment and a printable improvement tracker, which you can use to improve yourself and strengthen the concepts that we've discussed in the class today. In the next session, we're going to learn how to structure your speech. I hope you like this session. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.